Coyotes fans. Welcome into another edition of Coyotes Corner alongside Dave Vest. I'm Luke Lapinski. The season is here, Dave. There's no more counting down. It starts this week.
It does, and it's not just another Coyotes Corner podcast, Luke. It's the season preview.
I like to think every episode of Coyotes Corner is not just another episode of Coyotes Corner. We push the limits on every show.
Those were your words. I was simply repeating them and clarifying that this is the one that we've been looking forward to the most. The summer podcasts are great. We get to talk hockey in the middle of June and July and August, but today is October, or today is a day in October.
Today is all of October rolled into one. Best sports month of the year. I don't think anybody in their right mind would debate that. March is close, but it doesn't have everything. October has everything, including hockey starting on Wednesday of this week. For the Coyotes, it'll start on Thursday in Anaheim against a division rival that actually a lot of people have picked to go to the Stanley Cup this year. So a nice test for the Coyotes right out of the gate. But Dave, let's get into this. Here we go. 82 games, clean slate for everybody. The Coyotes look a lot different than they did when the season wrapped up last April. And, you know, it's always tough when you have change, but there's a lot to be excited about with this team, and that's not just me saying that because it's the start of the year. There's some very compelling storylines for this group heading into Game 1.
Well, let's start right at the top with the new head coach.
Yep.
Rick Tocchet has come aboard to lead the Coyotes behind the bench. He's brought in two new assistants, in Scott Allen and John McLean. It's been very clear to me through the, 17 days of training camp that we just witnessed, that there is a whole new vibe around this team. And we could probably do an entire podcast on that. But just to sum it up, there's a lot of excitement here, a lot of freshness, for lack of a better term. It just seems like there's something new here, a new vibe, a new culture. And I'm eager to see how it's going to play out on the ice, because off the ice, you know, in the hall, in the dressing room, you can just sense that this is the beginning of something new.
I'm really interested to see how this goes, because dating all the way back to when the Coyotes first started their coaching search, I was asked on a different platform, just give me a name. Give me somebody the Coyotes might look at. And nothing had been said yet. And I just threw out Rick Tocchet because it made the most sense to me at that point. Obviously, I'm not interviewing the guys. Nobody had been interviewed yet. But to then see it play out in such a way where John Chaika and the front office went through all those different interviews and decided on Rick Tocchet, and the way things played out where Rick Tocchet was available because Pittsburgh had just won the Stanley Cup, so other teams had already filled their coaching vacancies. It all worked out really, I think, very well for the Coyotes. He just has a very good new approach, and it's important to find the coaching style that fits your team. And, maybe Rick Tocchet's approach wouldn't be perfect for some other team, but he just came from the team that won 2 Stanley Cups. And that approach, it doesn't take a hockey genius to figure it out. That specific approach should work with this group, given the players the Coyotes have. I think he's going to really maximize the talent, the young talent on this team. I think they're going to be a lot of fun to watch. And that's not just, for hockey people. I think just in general, they're going to be a lot of fun to watch. There might be growing pains in the beginning, but you're right. There's a real good attitude around this team right now.
There's a buzz. How about that?
Okay, that's a much shorter way to say what I just said for 45 minutes.
You mentioned all the players, and let's talk about the roster, which was crafted, as I mentioned, over the last 17 days.
Crafted. But forged out of metal?
Thank you. Finalized today, though. The last 2 moves were made this morning, and obviously I'm tipping my hand that today is October the 3rd. The Coyotes are down to 23 guys on the roster for Thursday's game at Anaheim, and also one more being Jacob Chychrun, who is injured. He's not technically on the roster, but let's not forget about him.
Yeah, it was pretty competitive getting down to those final spots. Like a guy like Mario Kempe, who looked really good throughout training camp, ends up going to Tucson. That doesn't mean that's the end of him. That doesn't mean we're never going to see him again. But what it does mean is that Dylan Strome is on this roster. And there's a lot of different ways to look at this team now. But I think we have to start with Strome, or at least that's where I'm going to start, and I'm the one talking, so that's what's going to happen here. This is a tremendous opportunity for him. My stance on him was always, if he doesn't make the team out of camp, he's 20 years old, and he can be called up at any time. This isn't like last year or the year before, where once you go to Erie, you're stuck there all year. So it's much different this year. I didn't think it was like the end of the world if he didn't make this team out of camp. Obviously, he wants to, though, and he did, and that says something. And I think more than anything else, it says that Rick Tocchet wants to see what he has in these young guys with upside. You could have tinkered, you could have sent Strome to Tucson, and you could have moved Nick Cousins or Jordan Martinook or whoever to center, and you could have done all these different things. But why not just see what you have in Dylan Strome? And Christian Fisher and Clayton Keller make the team as well. We'll get to them in a second, but now you're looking at the future of the Coyotes. And that's not... Look, Dylan Strome earned his way on, too. His last week, ever since basically the Tucson game, he took it to a whole new level, and he had to.
So we're talking about surprises. At least that's what we have on the board. And you mentioned Dylan Strome. Are you surprised that he made the team?
No, I'm not surprised. I think it says a lot about the direction of this team. And look, this isn't breaking any new ground either. But if you look at this deeper, they need to know what they have in him specifically because of the position he plays. Is he going to be a true number one center in a couple years? Is he a true number one center this season at some point? Is he your number two? Is he your number three? I mean, you have to determine where you're putting Derek Stepan, where you're putting Christian Dvorak, how you're going to use Brad Richardson. So I like the idea of get him in there now, see what he can do. And I've long felt that Dylan Strome's game doesn't show up as well in practice as it does in an actual game situation. It's not to say he doesn't practice well, but it's just the things he does in a game aren't always going to show up in a drill. So we're going to see. We're going to see where he is right now.
In terms of surprises, not a lot from this camp.
I think usually when you go into camp, you have a pretty good idea. Out of 23 guys, you figure you probably know about 19, 20 of them are pretty much locked in.
I've got two, and bear with me here.
I already am.
The first one, because it's not really a surprise. Clayton Keller, we all assumed would make the team. I'm not surprised that he made it. But the manner in which he made this team, he was dominant in the preseason.
Yeah.
Offensively, he led the team with 8 points, 3 goals, 5 assists. He was solid in all 3 zones. And just the way that he came in here and introduced himself to the new coaching staff, if you will, I was very impressed by that and a little surprised. Although we did know that Clayton has that swagger that Rick Tocchet has talked about. He's a very competent young man. But I was kind of a little bit surprised in the manner in which he made this team. And by that, I say that in a positive manner, that he just kind of came in here and just grabbed the job from day one. You
would think as a rookie fighting for a roster spot, you might have to sweat it out the final week of camp. You knew he was on this team 2 weeks ago. I mean, he was similar to Jacob Chikrin last year in the sense that he came in fully expecting to make it. But even last year, everybody's like, is Chikrin really going to make it right after being drafted? Keller, I feel like, knew all along. I feel like most people expected it all along, but you knew for sure, I would say even before that Tucson game, you knew, like, he's on this team. I mean, you mentioned the 8 points led the team. That was 2 points behind Connor McDavid for number one in the entire NHL in the preseason. And I know they're preseason stats, but if you look, McDavid led the NHL in points, Austin Matthews led the NHL in goals. I mean, that's not a coincidence. Those are 2 of the best players in the league. For Keller to be that close, I think the preseason matters more for a guy like him because the only real criticism of him is his size. And so you look and you see him play in college, he's dominant. You see him in the World Juniors, he's dominant. When he started to really stand out in the World Championships against other NHLers, I think people started to take more notice nationally. But he's playing against NHL-sized players in the preseason, and for him to still be that good, I don't expect him to score that's basically 2 points a game for him. I don't expect him to put up 164 points this year. It's not 1983. But
it's not.
It's no.
Is this shirt okay?
Sorry, I didn't want to. No, it's not. I don't want to give away exactly when we're recording the podcast, but it's after 1983. I expect him now to not only just be on this team, but make an impact this year.
Well, I want to talk about this a little bit more when we talk about the top line for this team, because Keller is clearly a part of that. But one little surprise I wanted to mention before we move on is Zac Rinaldo. Zac Rinaldo made the roster. Now, of course, we know, I'm not sure the fans are aware, Zac Rinaldo has to serve a 5-game suspension handed down by the NHL from a hit he delivered not last season,
the
season before.
Yeah.
So Zac Rinaldo will not be playing on Thursday night, or he will not be playing in the first 5 games. He's got to sit those all out. But Zac Rinaldo made this team, and we talked to Rick Tocchet about that today, and he came right out and said that Zac earned a spot. This isn't some sort of move where they want to burn those games and then maybe, move Zac down to the AHL. That very well may happen. we don't know what's going to happen with the team's health over the next 2 weeks. But the point I'm laboring to make here is Zac Rinaldo made the roster.
Yeah, I mean, when you construct the roster, the 23-man roster, and as you mentioned, Jacob Chikrin is the 24th guy, but he's not, once the season starts, he's going to be on a list where he doesn't count against those 23. When you construct it, you have a little bit of flexibility, but generally speaking, you're going to go 14 forwards, 7D, 2 goalies. But you don't dress all those guys. You're dressing 12, 6, and 2. So it doesn't hurt that Zac Rinaldo's not going to play in the first 5 games. As you said, he earned a spot on this team, but he's not going to be a regular player, most likely. What he does is he fills a role that nobody else on this team really fills, especially among the forwards. There's a lot of skill and speed on the Coyotes. You don't necessarily have, for lack of a better term, like a tough guy out there. And look, Rick Tocchet was a tough guy when he played. Rick Tocchet also put up 30-plus goals a lot of times. I mean, Rick Tocchet was, he's old school. It was a tough game then, and he was scoring goals. But if you look and you say, we've got all these young skill guys, we want a guy like Zac Rinaldo out there to sort of police things if other teams want to take any liberties, it makes sense to have him on this roster, but it doesn't throw you off that he can't play the first 5 games because he was probably going to be a healthy scratch a couple of those anyway.
All right, so back to the top line, which we want to talk about for sure, because what we've noticed the last few preseason games and in practices is that Derek Stepan has been centering Clayton Keller and Max Domi, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that line based on what you saw in the preseason.
It's a fun line. I know we've talked all summer about how this team's going to be more fun to watch and to listen to on the radio, of course. It's just going to be an exciting team. When you're out here and you see them in person, hockey's always exciting, but there's speed and these pieces fit together, and that line in particular, they don't start the season as the best line in hockey or anything like that, but they're a compelling line because Derek Stepan has had a lot of success in this league, and he knows what he's doing out there. And he's not slow, but when you put anybody out there with Max Domi and Clayton Keller, you're going to be the slowest of the 3 because those 2 guys are just absolutely, they're just blurs on the ice basically, and they're both playmakers, and we're seeing Clayton Keller play on that right side where the Coyotes needed somebody, and it sets him up on his off wing to shoot more. So that is just... That's a fun line. There's a lot of potential wrapped up in that line, and they fit together pretty well in the preseason, and I would assume that continues for a while in the regular season.
Derek Stepan has been telling us all preseason that chemistry is challenging. You can't just put 3 guys together and say, hey, go be productive. Sometimes it works, he said. Sometimes it doesn't. He was very encouraged by the chemistry he felt with Domi and Keller, and I took that as a very positive comment from Derek. He's coming in here fresh, as a lot of the guys are, and to be put into that situation with those 2 guys with their skill level, and I'm not saying Derek isn't at their skill level because he is.
But it's different, though.
Different, but still very skilled. But Derek Stepan saying that the chemistry between the 3 of them is good based on just a couple of preseason games, I took that to be a very positive for this team moving forward.
But that's why you have the preseason. Like, we all knew that Derek Stepan and Max Domi and almost certainly Clayton Keller were going to be on this team. You don't want 3 guys on the same line that are the same player. That just doesn't work. You need to have guys that do little different things on the ice, but then you don't know if they're going to fit together until they actually play. So that's what the preseason's for. Get that line, and like you said, that line's been together for most of the preseason. Clearly, Rick Tocchet wanted to try it out early. He liked what he saw, and he continues to like what he sees from them. So that's a real. I can't think back to a top line that we've known for sure going into a season with this much anticipation.
One final thought on Derek Stepan, and I'm sure you'll back me up, is I just get a sense from being around him in the room and watching him and hearing the things that he says and just looking at his resume more than anything, that guy's a winner.
Yeah.
And it's a very important element to have on this team. Nicholas Chalmelson is another guy. We haven't talked about him, but he's won 3 Stanley Cups, of course. Derek Stepan hasn't won 3 Stanley Cups, but he's been in the playoffs every season that he's been in the NHL. And I know, obviously, there's 20 guys on a team, but
23.
Not at the same time.
Oh, okay.
And not on the ice at the same time.
Well, I mean, you can do that, but it's a lot of penalties.
A few penalties. My point is Derek Stepan is a winner, and I'm very excited to watch him and see how that mentality trickles down to this team.
Yeah, and you're right. I will back you up on that. And then even beyond, I would just say it's been evident since day one how much he likes the idea of being a Coyote. And sometimes you get traded to a new team, and you're kind of I've played my whole career with my former team. I miss it there, whatever. That hasn't been the case with him, and that's not a knock on the Rangers by any means. He had a lot of success there, like you said. But since day one, you talk to him, and he's excited to be here. And I know I've said this before on this podcast, but the players know. When players want to be on a team, especially guys that have been in the league, and they're not just trying to get in and play on any team that they can. Derek Stepan could play on any team in this league, and he'd be a top 6 forward. To see that sort of excitement since day one, it says a lot about his leadership, but it also says a lot about the talent on this team now.
Okay, let's move on, and I want to ask you where you were or what you were thinking when Oliver Ekman-Larsson crumbled to the ice in overtime of a preseason game early in camp.
Well, I was in the hallway that he was getting helped down, so that was kind of a...
What was the feeling in your gut?
Well, I could tell you the feeling in the arena. That was the home game at Gila River Arena, and it was a fun night. Everybody's excited. It was a fun game. The Coyotes jumped out, scored a few goals early. It was 4-4, I believe, in overtime. Clearly an accident. Mikkel Bodker and Oliver Ekman-Larsson, that's probably Oliver's... If it's not his best friend in this league, it's certainly one of them. For them to get tangled up in overtime, and it didn't look great, and it just felt like it was just silence in the hallway. I mean, everybody went from laughing and joking around to, okay, this is kind of a big deal, potentially. As it turns out,
not that
thankfully,
bad.
Not a big deal.
Not a big deal. Oliver has been practicing with his teammates the last few days. There's a couple more practices, or I should say one more practice and a morning skate before Thursday's opener. I suspect he will play. If this is anything, I was out in Scottsdale with him as he played hockey with about 300 kids on a deck hockey rink the other day, and he looked pretty good. So I'm very confident that OEL will be ready to go on Thursday night. The other player we need to talk about, and we don't know as much about, is goalie Antti Raanta.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the players the Coyotes brought in, the established players this offseason, and it's Derek Stepan, it's Niklas Hjalmarsson, it's Jason Demers right at the end of the offseason, and it's Antti Raanta who came over in that trade with Stepan. They're all important. He's extremely important. He's supposed to be the starting goalie for this team, and he will be. But we didn't get to see him much in the preseason, and so
2 periods.
Yeah, so that's still something to keep an eye on. Hopefully he's able to go for the season opener. Very excited about him because of it's not just last year. And last year he was playing so well at times that the Rangers actually played him over Henrik Lundqvist, which just blows my mind because Henrik Lundqvist is one of the best goalies I've ever seen. But Raanta learned from Lundqvist. They had a really good starter backup relationship there. And it's really the last 2 years in New York. Antti Raanta had established himself as pretty commonly accepted around the league that he was the first backup around the league that was going to become a starter. And he's at a good age to do it. He's late 20s now. That's he can really potentially take over as the number one guy on a team. I'm excited to see what he can do. We'll
see, too. He has been nursing a lower body injury through camp. He's been practicing the last few days. Another practice before the game. We'll see. Obviously, the Coyotes sent Merrick Langhammer to the AHL on Tuesday, so Raanta will either be the starter or the backup. We'll just see. I think it's a little too early to tell if he's going to start Thursday's game.
Yeah, but to your point, you wouldn't send Langhammer down if Raanta wasn't close to being able to play. You wouldn't put yourself in that position. So
you're making my point for me, but better.
Pretty much, yeah. That's why I'm here, is to sort of highlight how your point could be better if you said it the way I want to say it. Yeah, he may not start in the first game. Maybe he does, but he should at least be good to go.
All right, so this afternoon, let's talk about what we witnessed over at the JW Marriott in Paradise Valley.
Inn.
At the Camelback Inn. Did I say that right? All of the proper...
There's a lot of names. Well, look.
It was a great event at the Camelback Inn
yes.
at the JW Marriott Resort.
Very nice facility. Very nice food. There's a reason I'm wearing a suit to this podcast, Dave, and it's not for you. And it's unfortunately not for the listeners because they can't see it. It's because we came from there.
I noticed you had your dessert, and then no one was looking but me. You had Tyson Nash's as well.
I would have, but Tyson scooped up his food pretty quick. Excellent food. Excellent atmosphere. all the players there, the front office, Andy Barraway, so the ownership's there. Some fans were there as well. For some reason, they let you and me in there. Just a real, kind of a cool way to kick off the season. Did it last year too. I think they've probably done it a few years, but I was at the one last year, and it's sort of a good hockey communal thing to start off the year.
Let's map out the next few days and this opening week.
Okay, let's do it.
Coyotes start the season on the road at Anaheim. That's on Thursday, October the 5th. And we invite fans to watch on Fox Sports Arizona and listen on Arizona Sports Station 98.7 FM.
Yes.
Now, the first home game is Saturday. And I didn't put this on the board, so I'm going to come at you.
We're going off the board.
We're going rogue.
Okay. Oh, well.
Red carpet. Are you going to walk the red carpet?
Apparently I am. I just found out about that earlier today. Apparently some of the broadcasters are walking the red carpet.
You better go shopping or send that suit to the cleaner.
That's okay. I've got like 40 suits. Bob Heathouse, I heard, is going to do the moonwalk down the red carpet.
Really?
Yeah, I haven't told him yet, but that's what he's going to do. I've been telling other people. So that right there might be the highlight of the whole event.
So we invite all the fans to come out for that. All jokes aside, the players are going to walk the red carpet from the parking lot to the arena to signify the start of the home season. So it's never been done before here for the Coyotes. It should be a lot of fun. Fans are invited to come out and line the red carpet.
Should be cool. Saturday night's going to be really exciting, not just because it's the home opener, but because you're playing a team that you've never played before in the Vegas Golden Knights. So that's going to be certainly something to watch, and they're a team in your division too, and they're the other team in the desert. In the NHL, you've got two teams in the desert now, so there's going to be a rivalry there. Maybe there isn't in game one, but it's the start of a rivalry. You're literally going to you're going to be in on the ground floor for a rivalry.
A couple little housekeeping matters here, Luke, before we move on to another topic. I just wanted to point out to the fans that the Coyotes are scheduled to be on the radio on Saturday for the home opener on 98.7. However, if the Arizona Diamondbacks win the wild card game on Wednesday against Colorado, the Coyotes game will be moved to ESPN Phoenix 620.
Yeah, so you can still hear us, and you can still hear Bob Heathouse, myself, and Paul Bissonnette. So I know we haven't mentioned that on this show. I know we mentioned it a couple weeks ago, but Biz has gotten a couple games in now, preseason, and I think we all thought he was going to be a natural. Even the jump from game one to game two, it's noticeable. He's excited. He's ready to go. He's really embracing this. It's always tough when you have played in this league and you're still in your 30s, you're like, well, I could still play. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I could still play. I don't want to hang out with Luke Lapinski and Dave Vest.
He doesn't?
Well, the second part. But you want to still be playing, but he's into this. He's excited. He's ready to really take off with this and run. He's already working well with Heater, so that's going to be fun.
I look forward to seeing Paul on the road as I make this transition into a shameless plug for myself.
I was going to say that.
I'd like you to do.
Well, you've already said it. Dave Vest will be traveling with the team this year, which, just be aware of that if you're in one of the other 30 cities around the NHL. But, if you're here in Arizona, be aware that that's going to make the content on ArizonaCoyotes.com that much better because you're going to be at every game.
Thank you, Luke.
You're welcome. So, we have nothing else. We're going to transition into this. All right, we have to mention this because he was a big part of both of our professional lives. Of course, Dave Strader passed away this past weekend. I don't even remember exactly how many years I worked with him. 4 years here in Arizona. Such a great broadcast team right when I first walked in with Dave Strader and Darren Pang, Dave Strader and Tyson Nash. Dave Strader is somebody that I looked up to so much before I ever even worked in broadcasting. When I was a kid, you hear his voice, and he didn't only do hockey in his career, but man, his voice was synonymous with hockey. So great at what he did. It almost felt unfair to have a guy like that doing a local team because he knew he could do national broadcasts, and then he did, and he was great there, and he was great with the Stars, and just a great guy, honestly.
He was. Dave was a true pro at his craft, but beyond that, he was just a really nice man and a lot of fun to be around. And I know, speaking on behalf of everyone that's worked with him here with the Coyotes, Dave will be missed very, very much.
Somebody that really you could always tell how passionate he was about hockey and how excited he was just to be at the rink. So yeah, that was tough news for everybody, not just here around the entire hockey community over the weekend. All right, that's going to do it for us. The regular season starts, depending when you hear this, within hours. So for Dave Vest, I'm Luke Lapinski. Thanks for listening to Coyotes Corner.